Okay. So with that being said, when we say the art ecosystem, how do you view that? Like, what does that mean to you? Does your practice how do you feel like your practice sits within that system?
Um,
Personally, structurally, what does that
it's
mean?
tough, right? Because the art ecosystem's so big that I'm sure at a level it sits in there as like, hey, this is like a Nigerian American artist. Like for a gallery, for a museum, it could literally just fit like we want to highlight this. I think my
Mm,
arts ecosystem also speaks to like the people like, Wole, other collectors, artists, friends. Like my ecosystem is more about artists and patrons than the gallery, I guess. But I
mm,
think that's kind of maybe how I separate it. You have like fine art ecosystem, and then you have your own personal ecosystem of like your art network that's supporting you or has influence on you. And I think I've focused more on my personal art ecosystem and my network more so than on the bigger, powers that be in that way.
mhm.
So I think my work is positioned in of, at least personally, in of like my community. A lot of times I'm trying to do studio visits. I'm visiting collectors. They're turning into friends. Like we're building relationships. And I think I've kind of used my art to connect with people, and like I kind of feel like I'm like friendly in that way. And but then I guess conceptually, I mean, yeah, that's a hard. I don't know if I could really answer where it sits in that way because I don't have that perspective. It's like
Mm,
I think it sits in me being like a young black artist that is in like a major kind of like art city like New York. And there's a little bit of, with art sometimes getting like articles or recognition from publications that aren't art. Maybe it's like fashion or it's some kind of cool hype thing. I think there's also a little bit of that it sits into. And I think
mm,
I'm now trying to make sense of like, okay, what path do I want? I moved right now, I'm in my studio in Hudson Valley, which is outside of the city. So it's like essentially in the woods. And like I've kind of liked this idea of removing myself to just kind of have my focus be on the work and the craft without necessarily feeling like I need to validate it or promote it through all this kind of public. My mindset's kind of like my art is for the people that it's for and it can't be for everyone. So I've tried to
mm.
like position myself where I'm not appealing to like the masses or doing stuff that they're like, oh, everyone's gonna see this, and just kind of being like, yo, people will discover this work when they need to discover it. And like it's not necessarily about getting rich or being in magazines or doing all that stuff. It's about making art. I always say no
Mm.
one is to like be an artist. Like I think it chooses you to be on. I never thought I was going to be an artist. I wanted to make film, and not that making films isn't art, but like I didn't think I'd be making this kind of art, and I think it just kind of like worked for what I was doing. So I'm here right now, and I'm trying to figure it out.
Just randomly, can you quickly say like how you made that? Like what happened? How did you go
Oh,
from filmmaker, from wanting to be a filmmaker to, because I wanted to be an architect and I went to school for architecture and then I found myself being an artist. So I'm always curious when I hear people say like tell their stories and life just happens. So can you quickly tell
I
us?
okay, so I'll give context. My parents both are artists. My mom was in textile and did batik, and my dad did batik as well, but painted. They both painted. My grandpa was in art. Like my sister made art. So I had grown up around art and I knew it was always valuable, but it wasn't my thing. I grew up like skateboarding, playing video games, hanging out with my friends. I wasn't really settled enough to like sit down and like want to work on some art. And I think as I got older, I got really into like fashion and clothing, and that's where some of the video stuff comes in because it's like adjacent to like music video and culture and style. And I remember having an idea for a clothing brand called University, and it was meant to be like these graphic tees. This is back when like graphic tees were really popular, and I was like
Mm,
working on the packaging of the books and the concept for the brand. And that's when I started kind of early on thinking of like conceptual art or like branding concept stuff. And I remember showing that to my friends. There are these two roommates I had that are good friends, Billy and George, and they're like painters. And I was like, oh, this is a brand concept I have. And he was like, oh, that could be an artwork. And I was like, no, this is like for fashion, right? Like this is like a company I'm trying to start. And I think it was early on where they started introducing me to these other ideas of what art could be that wasn't just like rendering something in proportion, you know, or like figuration, and it could be an idea. And I went down that rabbit hole and I was just like, oh, art was way more expansive for me. So these ideas of like, oh, I want to make a film, or I want to make a fashion show, or like a song, all kind of could be made under the framework of conceptual art. And that's kind of how I found myself here. It's like all the ideas I would have had anyway, I'm like, you can kind of just present them speculative within like the framework of fine art. So